you want to take the next number?
I want to see it before the chairman, but I also want to do it.
Good. Will you just throw my shoes up? Remember the right entrance of the clear. Je regrette, j'ai du retard, mais avec la mer qui ira. Thank you. No, comandante a posto.
The Aga Khan, 28 years old and very likely the most eligible bachelor in the world. He's the Imam, the spiritual leader of the Ismaili sect of the Muslim religion, 12 million people scattered over 22 countries. His wealth is so enormous that to calculate it is impossible. And since a good deal of it is held by him in trust for the Ismaili communities, any such calculation is pointless. He's certainly very rich. He's a direct descendant of Muhammad, but his mother is English. He's a Harvard intellectual and honors graduate. He's also an athlete and an Olympic skier. His father was Prince Ali Khan. It was his grandfather, the previous Aga Khan, who nominated him as his successor on his death in 1957. He tells his own story.
The Imam, of course, is the spiritual leader of the community. The community is very mobile. They have always been mobile. Generally, the figure that is given is between 12 and 5 million. The Muslims are divided into two main branches, the Shia Muslims and the Sunni Muslims. I suppose one could compare it to the division in the Christian churches between Protestant and Catholic. The main difference is that the Shia accept the members of the Prophet's family as the rightful successors to the Prophet in his religious heritage. They do not attach to them the status of prophethood, of course. This is against the basic principle in Islam. My family and myself trace our family line back to the Prophet and are accepted, therefore, by the community as the Imams. My grandfather was born in Karachi, lived most of his lifetime in India, and was the first member of the family, I think, to ever visit Europe. During the whole of his lifetime, he studied Western techniques as a means of improving the standards of living of his own community. And at the end of his lifetime, he had immense responsibilities. He had been president of the League of Nations, a means of improving the standards of living of his own community. And at the end of his lifetime, he had immense responsibilities. He had been president of the League of Nations. He had had a very active public life. My grandfather had not traveled a great deal and had sent my father, my uncle, my brother and myself out to tour the Ismaili communities on his behalf. I think that every member of the family was prepared for the responsibilities which might come to them. I don't think that any member of the family knew who was going to be the Aga Khan. But the feeling, of course, when my grandfather died was one of immense responsibility, a deep consciousness that the whole of one's life as one had planned it had changed. I was no longer a student. I was 20 at the time, therefore a minor. But of course my whole status changed. I left Harvard for a year and a half, toured all the main centers of the community, and then decided that it was the last chance I would have to complete my university studies. So I went back to Harvard and completed the year and a half in half a year. Of course, at the same time was handling community matters, which was a lot to do. Harvard is a tremendous training, and I think it also teaches you to work under very heavy pressure if you want to get the best out of it. It is, I think, fairly unique to be able to listen to the greatest authorities on practically any subject which you can imagine. There were some 350 courses being given at Harvard. I audited as many as I could. Of course, I didn't know that I was going to become Aga Khan, so that before my grandfather's death, I audited and followed the courses which interested me. Then after his death, I audited all those courses which I thought could help me in my work, and I think was very lucky to be able to go there. When I left Harvard, I felt that to go through a day without getting out at all was the most awful prospect. So I decided to take up a sport which I could do regularly. And I went back to skiing. I enjoyed skiing so much that I decided that I wanted to improve, and felt that the best way to reach good standard of skiing was to go in for competition. So I started racing. And I skied for the British team for, I think, 2 years, and was up for the Olympic Games. I did not train, nor did I ski with the purpose of skiing in the Olympic Games. Nor did I ski with the purpose of skiing in the Olympic Games. I skied because I wanted to improve the standards of my own standards of skiing, and because I enjoyed the sport.
The Aga Khan normally lives in his house in Paris. He's got a racing stable a few miles away at Chantilly and 10 stud farms, 6 in France and 4 in Ireland. He owns, in fact, 242 horses. In this, he's following a family tradition.
My grandfather's father had some horses in Persia, and my grandfather had some horses in India. But it was only, I think, when he came over to Europe for the first time, and then, in fact, it wasn't even the first time, it was later on, that he got interested in horse racing and decided to build up a stable. And he built up a stable which I think was really an extraordinary achievement. The decision for me to take over the racing establishment was difficult. I have got a lot to do. To take over an establishment which had had immense success and which was as public as is horse racing was in itself a worry. I would have preferred not to take over the establishment at all than to take it over and see it dwindle and lose its vigor. So I hesitated. Added to that, I had very, very little interest in horse racing. I was educated in Switzerland and in America, and hardly ever went to the races at all.
However, having decided to take up racing, it seems characteristic of him that he's taken it up seriously.
I really am very interested in horse racing now. I watch it with greatest interest, and if I'm not in Paris or in England or wherever the races are taking place, I'm very upset if I'm not informed of what's going on. But the problem I had, and I still have, is that my time for horse racing is limited, and I have to fit it into a tight program of work.
His home in Paris is the center, the headquarters for all the Ismaili Muslims. Since the communities range over South America, Africa, Europe, and the Far East, it's as logical for the center to be here as anywhere else.
It's an trade reorganization which has weakened the position of the country for its future. Anyhow, I think you should always be there. The fact that we live again in countries where the dominant faith is not the same as ours create everyday problems that have to be solved. And on most of these, the Imam is, of course, a consultant. That, I think, is absolutely excellent. But I think now that I have seen a number of points which he took with Pirani, in which he said that reorganization of trade wasn't this problematic. Today I would say that the Imam's duties cover secular problems just as much as religious problems. The Imam, and particularly my grandfather, and I have tried to keep up the tradition I have helped create schools all over the world, hospitals, insurance companies, banks, a complete fabric of institutions for the community to use and to better their standards of living. Since I have left Harvard, I've traveled every single year amongst the community. 1 journey or 2 journeys, 3 journeys, 4 journeys a year to the communities, depending on what the problems are and whether it is urgent that I should be there or not. But generally it would be visits to the schools or the hospitals or the sports centers or the mosque in the morning, appointments with leaders of that is planning development of the community in the future. And I must say that if I am onto it, it's just a series of appointments, discussions, visits. And it's very, very rough on everyone, including the members of the community who follow these tours, because in 2 months you cover an enormous amount of ground. And there is a limit to what a human being can absorb. After around a month and a half of touring, you find that you are no longer capable of concentrating on the problems as you should. And in that case, once you reach that point, it's better to stop the tour and try and get some rest, get some time to analyze what you've seen, plan for the future, and then tour again.
The place the Aga Khan has chosen for rest is the Costa Smeralda, a beautiful stretch of white sand and emerald sea on the northeast coast of Sardinia. His method of relaxation is, to say the least of it,
Vada sul
unconventional.
picchetto numero 5. Piombo!
He's devised and organized what is almost certainly the most unusual and imaginative coastal development plan in the world. Under his presidency, a consortium of landowners has brought up 35 miles of coastline, including 80 beaches, which they're steadily turning into a place for holidays. It's a £70 million project, and that part of it, which includes turning a deserted inlet into the chief yachting harbour in the central Mediterranean, is already pretty well finished. The consortium keeps a firm control over the planning. They allocate sites, determine housing density, and vet all building plans by land purchasers. When the 10-year plan is complete, there'll be some 9,000 buildings along the coast, clubs, villas, flats, theatres, shops, offices, and 35 hotels. The Aga Khan is not just the man with the capital, he's the driving force.
The quay of the port, I think, was built in record time. Between February and August, we will have completed 280 meters of quay. And really, I think that is quite an achievement here in Sardinia or anywhere else.
This one is open. The other one, servant told me we shall get it. That's why we have to say something to take it. And we no people have got nothing to do here.
You know?
That's not bad, really.
They said they couldn't, they have to put the bamboo on and then the bricks on the tiles
Yeah.
on top. They said they couldn't get the tiles on. So I told them to take more work.
Well,
Anybody could look at this coastline and think it would be nice to have a house here. But not everybody would be prepared to tackle the problems of laying on water, and telephones and electricity, building roads, negotiating with governments and raising the money. If you're the Aga Khan, you may have access to capital and to the ears of the necessary politicians. Even so, the transformation of 35 miles of wild Sardinia into 35 miles of a planned Riviera was quite a task to undertake.
I was trying to get 4 or 5 days to myself because I think that one must get away at times. And I found absolutely no one down here, and fantastic beaches, free to one, not a cat on them. And I really fell in love with the coast. It was the most beautiful coastline. And at the same time I had an awful feeling that one day this might be completely ruined by uncontrolled construction, uncontrolled development. Well, what happened was my grandfather had a house in the south of France, my father had a house in the south of France. I had been there often as a boy. Then, when I had my own boat, I cruised a lot on the Italian coast. When I came down here, I was so amazed by the quality of the beaches and the color of the sea and the scenery that I decided that really I ought to have something down here. What I wanted to do was to avoid turning this into a business prospect where one got everything out of it possible. I wanted to try to contain the development, to make something really attractive as far as one's own judgment can do that, and avoid having the place completely swamped. We are trying here to stay in the background, in the tradition of the island as far as possible. We have tried to stop absolutely everything on the coast unless it has been properly studied and properly planned beforehand. It would be nonsense to say that we have achieved this. But I think bad planning in construction, first of all, you will ruin a site very quickly, and secondly, it will cost a tremendous amount of money. And so we try to take as much time as necessary for the planning, and then to push the construction through just as quickly as it can go through. I don't know whether ever a coastline as long as this one and as desolate as it was originally, whether the developers of an area such as this have ever had a chance to go back into the tradition of an island and a community which is unknown. Sardinia has tremendous folklore, art, tradition, custom, costumes, and we wanted to take everything we could that was of Sardinian origin. Cala Volpe was in fact rather a dull bay, and the idea was to build something which would catch the eye in Cala Volpe, so as to give it life and character. In Liscia di Vaca, it was just the opposite. Liscia di Vaca was a pretty bay, naturally, pretty rock formation, and a strange type of quiet charm. And some people prefer it to any other place on this coast. So the idea there was to build a hotel which would hardly be noticeable. And in fact, from the air and from the sea, you really have to look closely to even know that the hotel is there. The first hotel was built and open within the space of 10 to 11 months. That, I think, is very quick when you think that there was nothing here. No water, no electricity, no roads, no sewerage system. The Costa Smeralda is such a vast area that we are hoping to attract practically every type of holidaymaker. We have already built a number of hotels which are in the first class, and now are working on hotels for second and third class.
Merveilleux. Mon mari s'excuse, il est tombé.
Oh,
il est tombé sur le chose, sur le yacht.
C'est des gens qui sont amis. We would like to have services for every type of holidaymaker, but at the moment we are slightly restricted because of the means of communication with the island, the airlines, the boat services, etc. But in any case, our plan includes a very wide range of hotels, apartments, etc., so that every holidaymaker, whatever the length of stay and whatever the size of his budget for his holidays, can come here.
When we were about a mile offshore at about 25 feet, Nell's aqualung started giving him trouble. So I went down with the spade and undid the top crop on top of his loose valve, and at that point the sand shark came up in a shallow dive from 25 feet. And we were able, luckily, to tap it on the nose. What it was very frightening.
I think we have to examine, you see, of going away from the sea with the road so that the beach would be well protected. And the best thing is, one, when you are going back to Porto Cervo by helicopter, if you can just have a look, I think there is the possibility for the road to go up the hill without troubling us and passing in this other valley there, you see, without any trouble. And because otherwise we are going to bring all this.
Where will you bring it up?
I think around here, somewhere around here or around here.
You have to come back quite far here. You have to turn around.
Yes, but in any case, we need a road here for the development and for the village. But when you come back, if you could just have a look at this.
And we come to see also this road, because I think it is near the sea.
But that road isn't going to go on.
No, it goes that way.
That road stops here and goes up in the middle of this valley.
Yes.
Over the top here.
And goes down there.
Yes.
This is just a secondary road leading to villas and so on. Yes.
And I would leave it just as it is now, because no cars can get it up. Only jeeps can get it.
Yes.
We cannot really do any intensive type of development without having a model made. And in the architectural rules, the committee is allowed to call for a model, even for a private house, if they're not quite sure the way it's going to turn out.
Votre père n'a pas vu la maquette ici.
And of all the major developments down here, we've had these models made, and they really do help. They help for the architectural committee to decide what changes are necessary, if any. And it also gives people the impression that they know something more about the coast. They know what it's going to look like in a year or two. What we want to do is to try, in this development, to provide the purchaser here with everything he needs. To build his house if he wants us to build it. To furnish it for him if he wants us to do that. To plan his garden and run his garden for him.
Are about here, C5.
Yeah,
C5
is over there.
C5 is over there, so
We're
I'm
standing
C4.
right in front of C4.
C4.
So
Right
that
here.
Yes, I see. So this, we're on the top one now.
Yes, now we're on
the top one.
Now we're on this top level, which is where...
noisy here, don't you?
the construction which will go with this tourism must justify industries, people coming to work here. They were all originally farmers or cattle breeders in the area and were scratching a living out of a land which was practically barren. Now, with tourists as a reason for the income of money, the local population have regular salaries, their means of communication have improved, that is, they all have now scooters and cars, they dress better, they have electricity in their houses and many modern facilities, which I honestly don't think could have been dreamt of before this project was started. When I came here the first time, the road from Olbia here was totally untarmacked the whole way. One could hardly get here except by jeep and by foot. Now the road is tarmacked to about 2 miles of Calavolpe. The roads are a problem for us because it's a question of getting the government to build these roads so that we don't lose a year in the development. We guarantee water, electricity, telephone, roads and sewerage. And on our own land, there is the obligation to put the telephone and electric cables underground. The fact that people are now living and working in this area means that there will be the development of new municipalities, new towns, new villages. We are planning on building small workshops for artisans, for furniture, materials, ceramics, all this sort of thing. The workmen now have a regular income, they have work all year round. It is a different work, it is a work which I think even themselves are surprised to find how quickly they can learn. Sardinians run a new food store which provides for the whole of the Costa Smeralda.
Cuori di sedano 24 scatro da mezzo chilo.
5.800, signor Terra.
Bene, grazie. Metti là che la portiamo via dopo.
Metti gli spaghetti, mettili là.
Mettili sopra.
No, lì che sopra quelle casse gli spaghetti. Lì.
Mettili qua.
Se non ci sta sotto in carne la stessa non ci sta, aiuto.
Ecco, bisogna andare a con la barca là.
One of the services provided would be taking food out to a yacht if they should need it.
Voglio adesso a pigliare la spesa, sì.
Cosa vuole per domani?
Vieni, pigliala.
Polli.
Prosciutto.
Prosciutto.
E un po' di pollo arrosto.
Pollo arrosto.
Sì.
We got a study made of all the tourist harbors in Spain, Greece, France and Italy. Went round asking harbor masters, sailors, harbor organizations, captains, all the sort of technical points as to what should be found on a quay. That is, for example, fuel, water, whenever one needs it and with sufficient pressure so as to be able to fill a large yacht. When the harbor was finished and the yachts came in for the first time, we could hardly believe that these months of very hard work were all over and that finally the port was occupied by such a large fleet of really lovely yachts. We had the impression that it was slightly unreal. We had worked on the harbor for many months without ever seeing the sign of a yacht. And suddenly, within 24 hours, the quay was completely full up. So were all the other floating pontoons in the bay. And in fact, there were yachts anchoring in the middle of the bay. This was a really deep surprise, and I don't think any of us really appreciated its significance until well after the season was finished.
The arrival of such a large section of the smart Mediterranean yachting set gave a dazzling launching to the Costa Smeralda enterprise. It's too early yet to call the scheme a financial success, but it certainly looks like a very good investment.
Qui m'ont beaucoup touché. Nous avons fait de très grands efforts pour que vous puissiez arriver dans un vrai port à Porto-Cervo.
There could hardly be a scheme more European, more Western in its conception than this enterprise in Sardinia. And yet the man who's bringing it about is claimed by millions to be the direct descendant of Muhammad. Luxury, seclusion, seeing a scheme devised with such imaginative insights into the needs and tastes of the European smart set, it is impossible not to ask whether the Aga Khan, despite his spiritual office, is not really a Westerner himself.
Ever since I was old enough to understand a little bit of one's own surroundings, I have always felt much closer to the East. And until the day I die, I will always have these same feelings. I learned English and French long before I learned any Oriental language. But for years and years and years, I have been studying Islam, studying the East. I mean, if you asked me questions about the Christian church, I would be very weak. I am very far away at heart from the West. At the same time, I think that in many cases it's wise for the Imam to have a certain amount of space in time and distance, so that when he goes back to the areas which he has visited a year earlier or 2 years earlier, he gets a really clear picture of the transformations that are taking place. Generally, I try to do a tour of each area once every 2 years. When the Imam is there, most of the members of the community have at least half a day off every day, if not the whole day. It's nearly always a holiday. When they close their shops, they usually decorate the institutions when the Imam arrives, decorate the airports. It's really a time of festivity.
The question remains, which is the real Aga Khan? The Oriental, the Imam of the Ismaili Muslims, or the rich young Parisian, the racegoer, the Harvard graduate, the man behind the Costa Smeralda? It would be easy enough to sum him up as a man of two worlds, but it wouldn't be true. He doesn't seem to take on a different personality when he moves from one to the other. In Paris, or in a Pakistan village, he seems to be exactly the same conscientious, sympathetic, determined young man. If East and West have ever met, they have met here. He's not a man of two worlds. Perhaps the best description of him is that he's a man of the world.
The gynecological patients, and to know that your bed occupancy has risen considerably therefrom. I would have thought that the best person to award the prizes would be the chairman of the board of management, until such a time as the nurses include African and European trainees. At that time, we could perhaps ask the Minister of Health to perform the ceremony. I'm usually up around 6 in the morning, and I try to work from around 7 onwards until around 10 o'clock in the morning, independently of the secretaries. Then the secretary will come in at 10, and we will work until around 11:30, 12. Then I will have appointments which will cover an enormous field of problems. And then lunch, usually at home. I don't go out much. I do not like going out very much indeed. I would have more appointments in the afternoon, usually work in the evening with the secretary again, and then in the evenings it depends until either I stay at home or I will go out with friends. But generally speaking, in the last 2 or 3 years I've hardly been out at all, because if you start early in the morning you really can't keep going until 4 the next morning. De demander à Guirlande, le capitaine, s'il a trouvé des marins pour le bateau qui est en location cet été, pour le Tara. Hein? Voilà. Merci.
Thanks for watching to the end. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.